2006, the government formed the Rural Electrification Authority in a bid to electrify rural Kenya. But in March of 2019, the mandate of the authority was expanded to help in the development of renewable energy in the country. And the question is, how is the Rural Electrification and Renewable Energy Corporation ready to undertake its new mandate? Joining us tonight on Inside Government is Peter Mbogwa, the CEO of REREC. He's going to explain to us how the corporation is ready and willing to embark on its new mandate. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
Tell me things, what is going to be different under the new mandates of REREC?
It's important to mention that initially we used to operate as a Rural Electrification Authority, REA, under 6 mandates. Mainly mobilization of funds for rural electrification, undertaking programs relating to rural electrification, and ensuring that we come up with a master plan relating to the same. The new mandate under the new act, which was signed by the President in March 2019, actually added more mandates, and this is mainly in the area of renewable energy. So basically, we are expected to undertake research relating to renewable energies. We are supposed to undertake the projects relating to renewable energy. We are supposed to ensure that we actually work with the counties to ensure that we come up with the rural electrification in the areas through renewable energies. So basically, it's encompassing ensuring that we do develop, carry out research on renewable energies, and collaborate with the counties. Because basically our operations are mainly in the rural areas. So basically we are going to the counties where our activities are supposed to be undertaken.
Very well. And of course, I mean, it is common knowledge that as a country, Kenya is blessed with tremendous resources when it comes to renewable energy. And I'm talking about geothermal, I'm talking about wind, solar. And so where do you go from here? Because this is information in the public domain. Are you expected to map out, you know, this kind of resources for investors to come and invest, or how will it happen?
The first thing that we are doing is we have to ensure that internally we are ready. And what we've done is we are looking at our strategic plans. We're actually looking at the necessary budgets. We've actually undertaken our new human resource instruments just to be sure that internally we have created the capacity. We have actually identified internally what numbers do we require, what skills do we require. We have actually obtained the necessary approvals through the necessary government bodies. And now we are ready to ensure that now we go out and build the capacity, first internally, to ensure that we are ready. The next thing is we are looking at each of the mandates. And remember, we have increased, the mandates were increased from 6 to 20. So basically, much of these mandates relates to renewable energy. We are now going to even approach the necessary people who can fund some of these projects. Of course, through the government, because we are fully owned by the government of Kenya. We are going to ensure that within our new strategic plan, we factor in the necessary projects which will ensure that we carry out the renewable energy projects. The other thing that is I want to mention is that there are several energy centers. These energy centers are like demonstration centers. So currently, there are about 17 of them. They are currently under the Ministry of Energy, but there are discussions going on to ensure that these energy centers are actually handed over to Rural Electrification and the Renewable Energy Corporation for learning them. In addition, we are going to ensure that we come up with more of these energy centers. Basically, we are looking at a situation whereby you can walk into these energy centers and you're able to get a showcase what it means to look at when you're looking at renewable energies.
I mean, let's go back to the project, you know, of electrifying rural Kenya. It's go back all the way to 1973.
Yes.
When the government in 1974 formed the session of paper number 4 to form or to come up with the Rural Electrification Program. And basically this project was basically to bring power to rural communities. And when an audit was carried out in 2002, it was discovered that only 4% of rural Kenya had access to electricity. And that informed the decision to form REA. Since you came into force in 2006, what would you highlight as the biggest accomplishment of the authority?
Actually, at the time, the access rate was 4%. The rural electrification used to be a program under Kenya Power. And basically, it was important then for the government to create a vehicle whereby it can actually put its resources and ensure that the rural Kenya is opened up. And basically, the creation of Rural Electrification Authority then was to ensure that the government funds the programs which will ensure that the access rate is increased in the rural areas. Because basically, again, if you look at it from a commercial point of view, nobody would actually invest into the rural areas because the projects are expensive, but the returns are not as fast as you'd expect from an investment.
There are low returns and high capital expenditure.
Capital intensive, yes. So basically, then it was decided that we will be carrying out these projects, rural electrification projects, in the rural areas through grid extension and alternative sources. And actually, since then, we've been carrying out grid extension. We've done some of the off-grid solutions. We have the gensets. We have some mini grids. And to date, the access rate is above 70%. So basically, yes, not nationally. Actually, basically, then it means, and if you look at it from an economic point of view, the idea behind rural electrification is not necessarily to recoup an investment from the rural electrification program, but the idea is to open up economic activities in the rural areas and hence bring in a multiplier effect in terms of economic power to the rural Kenya. Yes.
And you know, Kenya has been recognized even by the United Nations for accelerating electrification, you know, of the country, which, by the way, is a goal under the UN goals, sustainable goals number 7, whereby, you know, countries are supposed to ensure there is reliable and readily available electricity, you know, for all houses in the country. And the question that has been is, do we really at this point know what has been the impact of electrifying 74% of Kenya?
The impact of rural electrification is big. And basically what normally happens is, and I'll use specific examples. When you go to a remote, quiet rural Kenya, then you carry out electrification. After the commissioning of the projects, when you go to the same place, the first thing is the place is noisy, because there are quite a number of economic activities that are happening. You'll find people are carrying out cloth making. Probably people are having businesses relating to power charging, phone charging. People are carrying out welding. So basically, there are economic activities that follow the electrification, including security. And basically, what happens is, once you carry out this infrastructure in terms of electrification, even investors now are willing to come and invest in the areas that we have carried out electrification. Of course, not forgetting that the RAD values, for example, goes up, and basically the economic activities come up. This also will help in terms of creating jobs for the areas that we electrify. Yes.
And you know, critics have also, you know, highlighted the fact that yes, you may be taking power to the people or energy to the people, but do they have the revenue power, you know, to ensure that yes, they are connected, but they continue to use this power?
Basically, if you look at the way we operate, our business is to create the infrastructure. Then we will jointly commission our project, hand them over to Kenya Power for billing and connecting the customers. So basically, once that is carried out, obviously, these lines must start generating revenues. Because now, every month, Kenya Power will be billing the customer, and they'll be paying. I had mentioned that some of these lines that we do create are not necessarily for immediate recoup of the investment. But basically, the idea behind rural electrification was to open up the rural areas and ensure that you actually ensure that other economic activities crops up, and when the customer pays, the generation of revenue happens. But the most important thing I would say for me is that other economic activities do come up, which includes other people coming and investing in the areas, ensuring that our people get jobs, and many other economic activities. Yes.
You know, there are about 170,000 public facilities in this country.
Yes.
That's about. How many of these have now access or have been connected to the national grid?
Actually, out of the total public facilities, and remember, every day they are coming up.
They're coming up.
Out of the...
And public facilities, we are talking about schools, hospitals, police stations, and so on.
Community boreholes, because basically you're talking of anything that benefits the public. So basically, out of all the public facilities, the connections have been done, and it is estimated that the remaining ones are about 20,000.
20,000.
28,000.
28,000.
Yes.
They have been connected.
Are remaining.
Are remaining.
Of the total, yes. But remember, as I said, they are every now and then you have a school coming up, you have a trading center coming up, so they are growing up.
They're growing up.
Yes, yes.
So it's not possible to ensure that all of them, have power at the same time.
It is not possible. And basically what we are doing is, that's the essence of ensuring that we actually come up with a master plan and ensure that it is regularly updated to take into account any other public facility that comes up after the last master plan. Yes.
I mean, the old authority, was rocked by various, procurement scandals, that somehow tainted the image of the authority. What lessons have you learned from your past mistakes, and how do you plan to correct it going into the future? Actually,
there has been those accusations.
Yeah.
But investigations have been done, but truly nobody has come up with a situation whereby you say there has been a scandal here. But basically what we've done is we have actually looked at our systems, and currently as we speak we're actually working on our optimization of our systems to ensure that at least data capture processes, they are all automated. As we speak, we have actually finalized last year our online procurement system. Today, if you want to tender with us, you have to do it through online system. So basically, we are addressing our systems. We are also addressing other areas like our people, because basically, even if you have the best of the systems, the only way you can ensure that you get the best is to ensure that you have credible and people who have integrity. Yes.
And actually, the people who came up with these allegations were actually members of the board.
Yes.
Yeah, who accused the management of sidestepping, the laid out procedures. And would you say currently that the management and the board are now reading from the same script?
Absolutely. And actually, if you look at some of the issues that were being addressed then, the bigger issue was the issue of the transformers. It's something that we sat as a management, as a board, and looked at it, and looked at the best way to address the issues. Among the things that we have done is to ensure that, one, at that time, before we changed the processes, we actually used to buy our transformers on an open tender. It means anybody, including yourself, would participate and ensure and separate our transformers. Today, we are only dealing with our manufacturers only. And actually, to ensure that we do promote our local manufacturers, we do local local manufacturing of our transformers. It makes a lot of sense because we would also want to ensure that before supplies of our transformers are done, we would want to go to the factory to carry out tests. And basically, if it's a factory within the country, it's easy to walk in and walk out, other than maybe going abroad to carry out these tests, this limitation. So basically, we have addressed our systems, and we have addressed our processes in some of the areas. So basically, the main issue then was the transformers.
And you have been relying solely on, exchequer financing, which forms almost 90% of your financing, right? Well, development partners, come in, to fix the gap. Bearing in mind that there are so many competing interests, for financing, are you planning to go the PPP way? Are you planning to float power energy bonds, or how do you plan to raise resources going forward?
It is very true that we have actually been relying heavily on government funding. Of course, this has been supplemented by the donor funds. But if you look at our new mandates, one of the mandates is to go out, and look for resources, and ensure that we carry out these projects. Yeah. So basically, among the issues that we are planning for is to look at the areas that we can raise funds and ensure that we fast track the implementation of these programs. Currently, we've actually had preliminary discussions with quite a number of possible funding sources, and this is something that we are going now to close as we go ahead. Yes.
Do you have any project that is likely to come up anytime soon through, maybe public-private partnership?
Currently, we do not have one, because basically, if you look at the emphasis of the government in the last 1 year, based on the budgets, it has been an emphasis to ensure that we complete the ongoing projects. Before now, we even present a case for new projects. So basically, as we look at our strategic plan, as we look at the new budgets, it's now the time that we're going to sit and look at the possible projects. We have a host of projects that we are actually considering. We have to continue consulting the government. We are fully funded and owned by the government, but we have projects that we can consider for possible partnership with other people other than government funding. Yes.
One of your biggest projects to date has been the Garissa Solar Power Project. That was commissioned last year by President Uhuru Kenyatta. What are other big projects that you have in the pipeline?
We currently have other projects other than the Garissa. Remember, Garissa was a 54 megawatt generation plant, which is feeding to the national grid. Other than that, we've actually carried out other projects. We have done over 25 projects, which are mini grid, generating power to some areas in northern part of Kenya. In the past, we have also actually done 20 generators, again in the off-grid areas. We are currently looking at one big project, which is at the World Bank funding. We are calling it COSAP, Kenya Off-Grid Access Solar Project. And basically what is going to happen is that this project, we are going to undertake two components. We are going to undertake a component on installation of mini grids in a number of off-grid areas in the 14 counties. And we are also going to do about 380 pumping or powering of boreholes to help those people in terms of getting water from their boreholes. The other component is going to be undertaken by Kenya Power, whereby they're also going to do part of the mini grids, and they're also going to do home solar systems.
Do you see a point whereby, there will be 100% electricity coverage in Kenya?
Yes, it's possible, and especially when you talk of access. Actually, initially, the government had looked at getting 100% in access in 2020. But of course, yes, but there's also a limitation in terms of the funding. Yeah. Remember, we are talking of a huge capital outlay. But in terms of the future, yes, we are likely to get 100%. Remember, we started at 4%.
How long do you think that will happen?
The government is looking at 2022.
2022.
2022.
In 2 years' time.
Yes, yes.
And, you know, there are also plans, you know, to migrate, you know, the Kenyan grid into green, or to make it green grid. And the target was the year 2022. At the rate that we are going, do you think this is also likely to be realized within the set time frame?
I think the question still remains the funding, because you may be having great ideas, but of course they need to be funded to be realized. So it is important that while we look at the projects that needs to be done, while we look at the programs that needs to be carried out to ensure that we have the green energy and the 100% access, again, we also look at the funding. Yes.
The funding.
Yes.
You know, we've seen a situation in this country whereby there are investors, you know, willing to invest or to put their money into the energy sector in Kenya. And a very good example was the Kipepeo project in Nyandarua County, whereby because of different political issues, you know, the investors, you know, had to leave. What do you think should be done, you know, to safeguard the interest of the local communities as well as the interest of investors to avoid a situation like Kipepeo wind power project?
Actually, if you ask me, one of the biggest hindrance towards these programs is the RAD issue. And basically what happens is everybody wants to make money, I agree. But basically what you realize is whenever a project is to be done in a certain area, then everybody wants to ensure that they get a lot of money out of it. And I'll give you an example. When we went to Garissa to do the Garissa project, there was a period that we could not carry out the project because there was an issue. People wanted to be compensated. But initially, when you go to start the project, there are no structures. But when you start, the issues of the structure come up because people want to be compensated. The RAD issue needs to be addressed. And I'm happy that the government is really looking at that, because there are quite a number of government projects, not necessarily power projects, other projects, which have stalled because of the RAD issues, the line that we are doing. Yes.
You know, let's talk about renewable energy. And the government is betting on renewable energy to bring, first of all, to make the national grid green, and of course to suppress the cost of power. You are selling your power to Kenya Power, you know, from the Garissa solar power, you know, at a cost of 12 shillings per kilowatt?
No, it's actually 5.49 US cents per kilowatt.
How much is that in Kenya shillings? That's about
5.49.
5.49?
Yes. No, about
no.
5 shillings. 5 shillings and 49.
5 shillings and 49 cents.
Yes.
So you're selling your power to Kenya Power, you know, from the Garissa solar power at a cost of 5 shillings, almost, let's say 6 shillings. If we were to invest more into this kind of renewable energy, do you see a situation whereby, you know, the public will be able to buy power, you know, at a cheaper cost in this country?
Yes, actually, if you look at how even power distribution is carried out, basically the government, the Kenya Power will actually take power from the cheaper sources. So the issue of the cost, I think, is critical. And if you look at the government thinking, is the government would want to get into green energy, green and clean energy power sources, which are cheaper. Because the only way you can ensure that the cost of power comes down is to ensure that the investment are also cheap. So basically, the renewable energy power sources will help in bringing down the cost of power. Yes.
And, you know, as a country, I mean, we have so much resources, you know, that we can tap to, you know, from solar to wind to geothermal. You've really invested in solar, especially in Garissa. Which other area do you see a lot of potential in terms of investment?
Actually, if you look at most of the northern part of Kenya, and especially when you look at it in terms of solar, there are quite a lot of areas that we can do these power projects, and then we are able to use the natural resources that we have. We are also looking at areas like Western Kenya and many other areas. But the areas probably, like when you look at solar, which you cannot get into, is areas whereby the sunshine is available in a minimum number of hours in a day. Yes.
So are we likely to see a bigger wind power project than the one that we have in northern Kenya, in Loyangalani, for example, being developed by REREC?
Actually, we have a number of renewable energy projects that are lined up. But remember, I said...
Which ones are these?
Like solar, we have some of the solars in the northern part of Kenya, I've said. There's one in the western. But basically, all these projects will only be realized if the funding is also taken into account. Because at the end of
how much funding are you looking at?
A huge one. If you're going to undertake the projects that we have lined up, you're talking of about to 10 billion shillings.
10?
To 10 billion
210
billion shillings, yes.
And this is, of course, funds that you expect to raise from the National Treasury as well as from, development partners.
Yeah, agreed.
Apart from the two sources, are you also planning to float maybe bonds to raise resources for these?
Currently, we are a fully funded organization by the government
under
of
the
Kenya.
new Energy Act, that was passed in March last year. I mean, you've been given the mandate, to look for other sources of funding. Agreed,
and these are some of the things that we are considering. Remember, for you to raise funds from the market, there are things that you have to put in place. For example, if you are raising funds, you're required to offer guarantees, you're required to offer assets. And
is the National Treasury willing to give guarantees for such investments?
They are willing, but you remember also the National Treasury will be looking at giving you a room to borrow based on the total national debt. Yes. So, because remember also, other than the energy projects, there are so many other projects that the government want to undertake in the country. Yes.
Mr. Bogwa, I mean, there are people out there, who are watching you tonight and wondering, and they are from areas whereby they are yet to access electricity. As we come to the end of this interview, what would you tell them?
Is that the government is committed to ensure that everybody in Kenya get access to power. And if you look at it all the way from 1973, there has been a conscious decision to fund projects, power projects, that will ensure that rural areas get power. So basically, based on the funding, the government is committed to ensuring that the Kenyans get power, and especially in the rural areas, because this is where we do operate. Yes.
So, and we are talking about not just power, but reliable as well as
power, yes.
affordable power.
Yes. And remember now, with the issue of the renewable energy, we are looking at clean and green energy.
Very well.
For our people.
Peter,
yes.
Thank you so very much indeed for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Government.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Very well.
Thank you.
Asante
okay,
sana.
asante sana.
Well, Peter Bogwa is the Chief Executive Officer of Rural Electrification and Renewable Energy, joining us here tonight on Inside Government to explain to us how the corporation is going to undertake its new mandate of ensuring that there is power in rural areas, as well as there is some serious harnessing of renewable energy in the country. My name is O'Brien Kimani. You have been watching Inside Government. We do this again on Thursday next week. Until then, bye for now.